Clockwork Planet is a sci-fi action light novel written by Yu Kamiya and Tsubaki Himana. This is my optimistic and spoiler-free review of Volume 1 as translated by J Novel Club. As with most light novels nowadays, the start of this book also includes a fairly lengthy prologue. If you're like me and you own a Kindle, I generally always look at the sample before purchasing a book. So when I read the Clockwork Planet prologue, I was really looking forward to the rest of this book. Unfortunately though, the prologue pretty much was one of the best parts of the book. That's not to say that the rest of the book was bad per se, but the prologue really showed what the characters are going to be like after the end of this whole volume. So as I was reading this volume, I was always thinking, okay, so how is this all going to lead back into that prologue? And it pretty much almost spoils fairly core parts of the volume. You could argue things such as, well, the main characters don't always die, but that in itself is a spoiler. What I would have preferred to see from the prologue is that throughout the volume you get pulled away and get this kind of lengthy history section, which could have easily all been wrapped up into one nice prologue section at the start. But instead, every now and then you're going to get pulled away from the current story and get explained about some history which isn't always relevant to what's currently going on. The core cast consists of 4 characters, each which are fairly unique in their own right. In this volume they don't really delve a lot into all the backstories of the characters, but the backstory of these characters is fairly core to what's going on in the plot, so I can imagine that in later volumes the backstory of these characters is really going to come forward. For most of the book, the party's split into 2, so you get the 2 viewpoints which you constantly jump between, one of them being Marie and Halter, and the other being Ryuzu and Naoto. I'll preface that one of these sides and viewpoints I found immensely more interesting than the other, but depending on what you're looking to get out of the book, that could depend from person to person. And this leads me into the main gripe that I have with this book. The whole point of setting up this kind of Clockwork Planet universe that this story is set in is that you've got this clock and gear theme, which really actually doesn't do anything for the book. I'm pretty sure if you went through the whole book and replaced any instance of clockwork with spellcraft and gears with magic, it really wouldn't change the story at all. And this all stems from the problem that right from the start you're never given any small scale examples of use of these gears which are used throughout the world. You're only ever given these huge, humongous examples that and the scale which is just impossible for you to actually imagine without giving any clear context. So just to talk briefly, there is an actual anime for this show which aired in the spring season of 2017. I didn't actually watch it, but I feel like if you did and you actually had some good visualizations of what's going on, it potentially would actually help you when reading this book. The character of Naoto is supposed to be this amateur clocksmith, but you get 0 examples of him doing anything which an amateur clocksmith would actually do. And I don't think this is a problem at all with potentially the editing of how the story is when moving over to English, but I just think as a whole, the book gives you absolutely zero examples of anything small scale. So for a quote such as, "An automaton which reproduced the human body using only gears was an aggregate of fine parts that numbered in the trillions. For comparison, the human body contains 10 trillion cells." So from the start of the book where they're throwing these kind of examples at you, and not even them, some of these examples are on a whole Earth world scale. I find it really hard to imagine someone could bring up any imagination for this kind of thing. This isn't enough to bring the book down as a whole, but there's some key moments in the book where if you can't kind of invoke this imagination of what these characters are doing, then it really hurts the pacing of the book. Aside from all this serious stuff, there is actually a kind of slice of life side to this book. There definitely isn't enough of it to kind of put a tag on the book saying that, but during this whole period, anything to do with all this clocks and gears going on really had 0 relevance to this whole section. And going back to the prologue, which really set me up for this very kind of sci-fi heavy action style book, it really caught me off guard. For some it might be a nice surprise, but for others, seeing as this section is fairly cliche when it comes to Japanese light novels, it might really put them off. Overall, this book has a bit of everything despite the kind of lack of tags that this book has. There's only 4 main characters that you get during this volume, but they are each unique in their own right. Some of the characters you get more of a backstory than others, but they've really set up for later on you learning a lot more about these characters. In the future, I really hope there's kind of a better example of the use of gears and the clock theme that this book is supposed to roll with, because during this volume, it pretty much didn't matter at all that that was the theme of the book. And as I reached to the end of the book, I thought straight back to the prologue, and I still haven't reached what's happened in the prologue, so I'm going to have to wait even another book to kind of get to the point of where the prologue is. So from the next volume, I really want to see, for a start, less spoilers right at the start of the book, and I also want to see some really smaller examples of this clock and gear theme, because that is the main driving point of this book, and I've yet to see any. If you like this review, then feel free to subscribe, as I put out at least once a week. And as always, thanks for listening. Until next time.